Welcome to the Three Old Goalies podcast, a Delusion Group podcast.
The Three Old Goalies are brought to you by thesquad.com because everybody loves a W. Check out the squad for all your recruiting needs. Music for the show is provided by the Floodgate Operators. Be sure to check them out on Apple Music or Spotify.
The Three Old Goalies podcast is not for goalkeepers under the age of 17. And now we send you over to Boa, Evie, and Bone, the Three Old Goalies.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Three Old Goalies. We've actually got a full house tonight. Producer Ryan has got us rolling, and we have a very special guest tonight, Coach Thomas Rongen, who has been a pillar in building the game in the United States for sure. Coach, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And I will go ahead and introduce my partners in crime, Greg Deutsch from Cincinnati and John Boa from beautiful Boulder, Colorado. And,
there we go.
We will, without further ado, we will turn it over to Greg Deutsch, who does all of our interviews, Coach, and enjoy because I call him the Mike Wallace of soccer. He'll get deep into the subject.
Love it.
So thanks a lot. And go ahead, Greg, you're on, buddy.
All right. Well, thank you again, Thomas, for doing this. I know it's been a busy week, but thank you. We are very, very excited to have you on. And I know John Boa's got questions for you. I know Ryan's got questions. So I just want to let our listeners and viewers know not only we have a former professional NASL player, we also have a former MLS coach of a few teams, also a former member of the United States men's national team, also coached the U20 men's national team for 2 consecutive runs.
Actually, 3.
And our first time, we have a movie star.
Yes,
we have a movie star. So I know viewers and listeners, you're going to have to listen to all this, but that's going to be toward the end. Very, very excited to have Thomas talk about that. So let's sort of get started a little bit. Thomas, obviously, you grew up in the Netherlands, Amsterdam. You came over back in the late 70s, and your first year you get to play with Johan Cruyff and under Rinus Michels. What type of experience was that?
Awesome, obviously. I mean, I'm from Amsterdam, so Ajax is my team. Rinus Michels that turned Ajax in the late 60s, early 70s when we went to 4 consecutive European championships, won 3 of them. The 74 World Cup team that Michels put together that became Total Football and Clockwork Orange, laid the foundation with Cruyff in Barcelona, where many coaches, in particular Pep Guardiola, still talk about Johan Cruyff and Rinus Michels. So if you talk about the last century, 2 of the most influential people in the world of football, if you have to pick the top 10, they're probably in the top 3, in my opinion. Cruyff did as a player, as a coach, obviously, and also as a front office person at Barcelona for a few years. And he shaped the game, quite frankly, that we're still playing today. And as I said, Pep Guardiola is probably the greatest examples by referencing Cruyff pretty consistently with that. So I was young. I was finishing my last years of my master's at the University of Amsterdam. In 78, I was part of the Dutch amateur team, which was the Olympic team. We played 5 games in the United States, 2 in California, San Diego, San Fran, Kansas City, DC, and New York. And our head coach became ill, so Rinus Michels took over that trip. And flying from San Fran to San Francisco, he was at the window. I was next to him in a middle seat, sweating because this was the great Rinus Michels. And at that time, I was 20 years old. And he said, looking out of the window, "What do you think?" And we were just going over the Rocky Mountains. And let's be real honest, America is just incredible in terms of a geographical and everything that comes with it. Every state is like a different country, and we have to go very far east or south to see anything like that, because you won't come to Belgium or Luxembourg or northern France or Germany, where you drive 2 or 3 hours south, east, or west, and you're in a different country, but not with the incredible landscape resources. And I went, wow, that's really cool. And I said to him flippantly, I said, I'm almost done with my studies. I'm going to backpack through the United States for a few months. That's going to be my reward, and I'm going to save up for it. Fast forward, probably 3 months later, I get a call from him, and he says, Thomas, I remember Thomas, I just became the coach of a team called the LA Aztecs in the NASL. I need a cheap player. You get $1,000 a month. You got to share a car with an American in an apartment. Are you coming? And I looked at my parents because I want an answer now. And I said, absolutely. So I thought I went on an adventure. And here we are 44 years later. I'm still here. So if it wasn't for Migos to go on that trip and remembering, because he referenced that story, remember when we flew over the Rocky Mountains and blah, blah, blah. He said, I thought of you, actually. If I don't go on the trip, if he doesn't go on the trip, it probably never happens because I was not a big-time player at that particular time, but I must have impressed him enough during that trip for the Dutch Olympic team. And in that specific position, the number 6 position, that was back then really a destroyer, which I was, get it and find Johan Cruyff as often as you can, simply, and don't do anything else. That's where it all started. So that was pretty cool. And then, you become members with George Best, Gerd Mueller, who at that time still was the all-time leading goal scorer in World Cup history. You play against Beckenbauer, Trevor Francis, and you guys are from that era. You understand, and you dabbled also on that level. What the NASL in particular, when Pele arrived through probably 84-ish, 85 for 10 years, was just a bit of a fad. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll party atmosphere was brilliant. Studio 55, whatever you want to call it, 54 for that matter. But it was a great experience for me, obviously, and laid the foundation. I found out very early I wanted to be a coach, and Cruyff and Rinus Michels and my roommate in DC United, Wim Jansen, that also played and started for the Dutch national team in the World Cup in '74, were great mentors for me to lay a foundation for my coaching philosophy and eventually become a high school, college, and then an MLS coach, and 320 World Cups, an Olympics, a World Cup in '98 as an assistant coach as well. So chief scout of the U.S. men's national team, and all those experiences from them I used going forward up till this day.
Yeah, I was going to share with, again, our listeners and viewers, not only was he with the LA Aztecs, he was with the Washington Diplomats. They folded, went to the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. They became the Minnesota Strikers. Also played indoor in the MISL. Also, interestingly enough, John Boa played in South Florida with the South Florida Sun, lasted 6 games. And better yet, I did not know this league existed. The Lone Star Soccer Alliance.
Wow,
Was a
there you
member
go.
of the Houston Dynamo, and that included Dallas Express, Austin Thunder, and the San Antonio International. How they got through, Thomas? How did you guys get through 6 games of that season?
6 games, but the most important game was we played Brazil, and Pele was a guest player during that time, and that was a big draw for us. And the owner was a rich oil magnate, and I said a majority of those owners were all in the oil business, and within a month the oil business tanked, and these guys just lost millions, billions for that matter. So the league folded, but we got 1 game in Houston against Pele, which is pretty cool, actually.
Oh yeah,
Glenn Davis, Keith Weller was the head coach of the team, and that was my last team actually before it all really collapsed, and I got into coaching.
Yeah,
the Lone Star League.
Yeah, we dig deep here on the show. You were with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, and I just want to share with some people who played on that team. Obviously, Ray Hudson, famous goalkeeper Jean Van Beveren, the backup Jim Teton's an American. IU standout Robert Meshbach, who I remember. Branko Seguda, the Canadian man. John Boa, you're not going to believe this. Who do you think the best player out of Peru is ever?
Best player out of where?
Peru. Peru.
Cabillas?
Yep, he played with him.
There you go.
He mentioned before that Gerd Mueller. I mean, what was it like? Take us through, a little bit of that season, because I mean, these are incredible. Those two are incredible stars. I mean, Cabillas, one of two people to score 5 goals in 2 different World Cups.
Yeah, pretty stunning. As I said again, and you look at that list and the axis, and Gordon Banks was part of that team, but played for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. Elias Figueroa, if you ever Google Elias Figueroa, they say he's the best center back that ever played the game in the world. From Chile, played on that team as well. Arsene Auguste played Haitian. I played in the '74 World Cup for Haiti when they tied Italy. And the list goes on from the players you mentioned: Bernd Holzenbein, Gerd Mueller, obviously, Brian Kidd, Manchester United, former player, Ray Hudson, Nene Cubillas. Brilliant. I was younger than most of those legendary players, almost by 10 years. And I soaked it up. I had an academic teaching background. So I love to learn, and I knew I wasn't a great player, so I needed to be a good student of the game. And I could not have asked for better coaches, better teammates that took their time to explain that to me. My roommate was Gerd Mueller at that time because I spoke fluent German, and I learned a lot from Gerd. Nene, I spent many days to the football and technical side going forward as well. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant to be part of not only that team, but the LA Aztecs as well, the Chicago Sting eventually, Karl-Heinz Granitza, Pato Mahertic, and all those guys gave me inspiration to further my knowledge of the game in all the different facets of it, technically, tactically, physically, emotionally, whatever it might have been. So I would say if you look at Thomas Rongen's blueprint and playbook as a coach, I can mention all those players that all contributed, some only for 2%, others for 50% in the Venus Meagles, but I soaked it up. And one of my best experiences were those years in the NASL, not only because of the playing part, but I got to see the world on somebody else's dime. One weekend you're in Vancouver, the next weekend you're in DC, you're in San Fran. Absolutely brilliant, and due to the fact that a lot of transfers and teams folded and leagues folded, and I coached 4 MLS teams. That means you got fired once in a while. I lived in 16 different cities in this country, and every city I found something absolutely stunning. I love sports. So here I am at Cruyff, sitting front row next to Jack Nicholson, watching the Lakers in their heyday. Here I am playing indoors for the Chicago Fire, or for the Chicago Sting, sorry. And who is the Rookie of the Year? Michael Jordan, playing in the same building at that time, the old building in Chicago, indoors, where both the hockey, the indoor team, and the basketball team. And quite frankly, the indoor team for 2 years drove more people Michael Jordan than the Bulls, for instance. Brilliant. Boston, again, we found in every city a prospective other sports team that loved soccer, which is great. Most kickers in the NFL are former soccer players. Venturi, for instance, Italian, so he gave us tickets to the Patriots, and he would give them tickets to the New England Revolution, just to fast forward. Omar Garcia-Parra, that played for the Boston Bruins, played with Joe Max Moore in high school, Joe Max Moore, the soccer player. So we were able to soak it all in, be at the greatest venues and stadiums in all sports for that matter, because every road trip back in the NASL was was 3 days. So you had some time to plan certain things. So outside of the fact that I had a great education through some of my dearest teammates, I also became very cultivated in regards to understanding strengths and weaknesses of particular cities.
Yeah, what did obviously playing for the indoor Minnesota Strikers and later on Chicago Sting, people forget the owner, Lee Stern, obviously a legend in this country.
Yeah.
Also got to play under Willie Roy. You mentioned Karl Heisternitz, who I got to play a game against outdoors when they scrimmaged in Orlando when I played for UCF. Hardest shot I ever faced, I will say that. What was the adoption like going from outdoor to indoor for the first time when you said, what am I getting myself involved with in this crazy game? Because it wasn't futsal, it was really, American ping pong.
Yeah, it certainly was. And for players like myself that weren't technically very good, I had my struggles in indoors, no doubt about it. There was some sexiness about indoors, smaller arenas, fans right on top of you, smoke bombs, cheerleaders, higher scoring. And that was one of the reasons why the NASL owners said, maybe we got to venture into the indoor game because that might be more an American game than the outdoor game. It didn't happen. And there were some guys that excelled. I had a tough time, quite frankly, but I embraced it as I did in most other games, be it indoors or outdoors. I enjoyed my Chicago experience with Willie Roy, eccentric head coach. Some of the Germans there, from Granitza all the way down to some other ones. I remember walking in the first day. I got traded from the Minneapolis or Minnesota Strikers that were initially the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, and Joe Robbie, who was actually from Minnesota, moved the franchise to Minneapolis. And when I got traded, as most teams do, you play a rondo before practice starts. Guys come 15, 20 minutes, and you play 5 versus 2, and it's fun part. Who's actually lacking one player because they're playing 4 versus 2, and we normally play 5 versus 2. And I try to get engaged, and they'll look at me and go, excuse me, you don't belong here. And you're from the Netherlands. So that group was predominantly German and pretty much looked at me as a Dutchman and went, get out of here. So I assume that the Second World War was still somewhat in their thorn. But that was a bit of a rude awakening for me, because I was always welcomed at other clubs, but that was a tight-knit group that didn't allow a lot of people to penetrate the German side of the locker room, so to speak. And it became toxic after a few years as well. So I learned from that and how to be a good teammate or not a good teammate.
Yeah. You alluded to, you got into coaching, that was your background educationally. I'm curious. So you started in high school as the assistant coach at Pope John Paul II in Boca Raton, Florida.
Yep.
2 years later, you're the head coach. I'm curious, why did it take 2 years to become the head coach?
Because he didn't have Nene Cabillas.
Yeah, when the NASL collapsed, most international players, I would say almost 90%, went back. And I was still young, and I enjoyed this country, and I wanted to give back something. So I 2 guys, I had no idea how to run a business, but we did okay, actually. I became a director of coaching for the Plantation Eagle Soccer Club, one of the first TDs probably in this country when nobody had heard of that. At that same time, I became an assistant coach at Nova Southeastern, and during that time, actually, some leagues popped up. So whenever a league popped up, Fort Lauderdale Strikers were part of that. Either Noel Lemon was the owner, the Traffic Group, the Brazilian guys, had a team, all called the Strikers, obviously. So I had multiple jobs. That's why being an assistant at Pope John Paul just made some sense, because it would be a great learning to learn my trade, so to speak, which I did for 2 years. I put the cones out for the head coach. I measured the squares, et cetera, et cetera. And then I became a head coach, and I found another yo-yo to be my assistant coach and do the cones. That person knew the cones, so I wasn't too worried about it. I knew my trajectory. I wanted to go, to the highest level, and all of those little things I think impressed Farouk Qureshi in 1996 when I interviewed for the mutiny, the Tampa Bay Mutiny job in the first year of MLS. And there was a lot of big names, by the way, and I was really a nobody. I've never really coached on a professional level. I APSL championship with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, late 80s, I think, 90s or something like that. But he picked me because I think he felt I had done my due diligence. And so I benefited from all the groundwork and all the hard work at that time with cones in the back of my car, balls, bibs, you name it, I had it. And then fast forward to, MLS, the U.S. men's national team, where the support staff is so much deeper. I look back at those periods and said, you know what, that's where you laid the foundation, TR.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I did some of this research. So in August of 1988, you're hired as the head coach of South Plantation High School. In February of 89, you're hired as the head coach of the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. What a big jump within 6 months. And as you alluded to, you won the league title then. Share with us that sort of journey. You're at one level and then kaboom, here you are at the next level.
Yeah, when the league went down, the guys that stayed here, which was mostly the younger guys, also the guys that didn't earn a lot of money. The highest I earned, guys, in the NASL, and that's true, was $48,000, where the majority of the big-time international guys were making good coin. But I didn't care. I was happy. My first contract was $12,000 in '79. I went from $12,000. Negotiated with Alan Rothenberg, who was the head, who was the president of the LA Aztecs and co-owner, to $24,000 because I scored actually 5 goals of set pieces. I was pretty good in the air. And then at DC, the Diplomats, I got a raise, and eventually I got to $48,000 with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, with Joe Robbie. So when it all collapsed, I had to find income. I mean, I don't know if it's on there, but I taught languages at Berlitz, Dutch and German, because I'm fluent in both. Again, the soccer locker. I started up on a high school level because the stipend season plus another $12,000 for Plantation High School, plus another 5 at Nova, plus another 6 at Plantation Eagles Soccer Club as a technical director, plus another 18 at the end of the day with the business I run, the soccer locker. I got back to like 48, and I tried to stay at 48. And then eventually, when the leagues came back, life became not necessarily better, but there was more finances. So you have to be patient. You have to work hard, stay within the system, be relevant as you could be. And thank God I stayed in Fort Lauderdale. When on 3 different occasions, the Fort Lauderdale Strikers were resurrected. And I was always part of that, first as a player, and the last 2 times first as a player, then as a player head coach, and eventually as a head coach as well.
Yeah, you mentioned Nova, and if people forget, it's Nova's. He was the head coach of Nova Southern, the men's program, from 1991 to 1995. In those 4 years, he went 50 wins, 35 losses, 6 ties. He's in the Hall of Fame. He was inducted there in 2028. What do you remember about coaching? I mean, I think people forget, Thomas, that conference, which is a Division II conference, it's called the Sunshine State Conference. It's one of the toughest conferences in the country for Division II. And year in, year out, I would say, the top 4 teams are usually in the top 25. What was your experience like? First, now you got to recruit kids, right? So that was obviously a different experience for you as well. So share with us, the journey through for those couple years.
Yeah, it was really cool. Actually, back then, Greg, it was NIA. And then after I left, it became D2. And one of the great things about NIA was And since Nova Southeastern University at that time had 3 or 4 majors, a lot of international students were interested in. So half my team was Scandinavian. And I'm telling you, at that time, it was not called Lynn University yet. I think it was the College of Boca Raton. And us would play against the FIUs. The FI, we would hammer Carl Kremser and FIU, for instance. Because, you know, our level was pretty darn good. And at that time, absolutely. You go up to Belmont, you go up to West Virginia and Wesleyan, where you run into the national team of Nigeria, you know, I mean, the NIA, because there wasn't an age restriction, and you could fuddle a little bit with former pro. The NCAA, you couldn't do. I had some big time teams, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah, absolutely.
FIT Melbourne College.
There you go, baby. Yep. There you go, baby. Bunch of English guys absolutely. Yeah, that was a great experience for me, and again, I'm in the Hall of Fame. Although I'm Dutch, we don't do Hall of Fames, but I guess anybody I talk to always finds it very special, you know. So I'll
absolutely, absolutely, yeah. You know, you mentioned the first year of the MLS in 1996, you were the Tampa Bay Mutiny coach. You also won the title and Coach of the Year. A couple years later, you hang out with the Revolution. You go to DC in 1999, win the MLS Cup championship. What were those first, few years? You're in a new league. You don't know what's going to really happen. It seems like it was very, very chaotic. And were you sure the league was going to make it?
No, it's a great question. No, obviously, we were all excited. Now we're talking about 10 teams, I think, in that first year. Was it 10 or 12? I can't even remember. And we sat in rooms with the prospective coaches, owners as well, and with Sunil Gulati and Ivan Gazidis that pretty much ran MLS in the first few years. Let's be real honest. Looking at how, put this forth and how we could survive. I mean, it was pretty unique to be part of that group. I was part of that a little bit before that because due to the fact I played in the APSL, Sunil had contacted me in the late '94 and said, Thomas, you're probably know more players in this country or internationally. Why don't you help me recruit players from indoors, from outdoors, whatever, that we can bring to a combine in San Diego, which I remember there was like 800 players, 10 coaches. We had to pick the initial first year, 1996, 20 players in the draft. If they're set up in all the respective cities, all these tryouts, and I traveled with Ivan Gazidis abroad to sign players actually from Valderrama to Donadoni to whomever, and then Sunil strategically would place him in, the better cities in terms of, Donadoni's gotta be in New York, whereas a Polish player should be in Chicago, whereas a Mexican player, the goalkeeper obviously, should be in LA. But I think it was when I was with New England in '98, I asked Sunil for a trade, and he said, Thomas, I don't think we're going to make it. This could last only a month. And it happened one more time in 2001 as well, when Sunil said they're suffering a lot of losses. Some of the owners who every 3 months had to ante up millions and millions to keep this thing going, obviously. And some of them missed their payments. So that's when Anschutz appeared. That's when the Huns all of a sudden owned 3 teams. So we went through some trials and tribulations, retractions, obviously. There's no more mutiny. There's no more fusion. There's no more, we added some and we looked fairly healthy, but we went through some really interesting years. The first 6 years was not, player acquisitions. The salary cap was really low. You had some owners there that had really no keen understanding what the hierarchy and tradition of the game. They wanted midgets as goalkeepers. They wanted to make the goals bigger. They want to change rules to make it more attractive, including, the Metro Stars guys. That has changed now a little bit. But I remember vividly sitting in some meetings, and thank God for Bruce Arena, myself, Ziggy Schmidt, Kevin Payne, Lamar Hunt, saying, time out. We're not going to change the game. This is a game that has been played for hundreds of years. Yes, we want attractive football. Yes, nobody losing games, which it wasn't true, by the way. So, but they pretty much said, we rather see 5-4 games than 1-0 games. That was the thesis a little bit in the first few years. That changed real quickly when the first coach got fired and coaches became tighter and winning became more important. But yeah, those were wild, interesting, educational, and some crazy years where it was touch and go a few times. And look where we're at right now. So they stayed the course, and the last franchise I just read went for what, 500, 600 million, San Diego, plus a stadium. You're talking about franchise fees have gone from. I remember Ellen was part of the initial Galaxy for 5 million. All the initial franchises, these guys put in 5 million. Look what the 5 million now is for the Crafts, for $500 million, for instance. So these guys that stuck with it from day one, if they want to sell it, are going to make some incredible profits, obviously.
Yeah. Again, for our listeners and viewers, he was also involved with Chivas USA and worked with the Toronto FC Academy director. But, in 2001, you get to work with the United States national team. 2007, you take over and lead the U.S. into the Under-20 World Cup. What was that experience like? As far as the selection of the players, were there any really good stories? Because that team, in that World Cup, they tie South Korea 1-1. They beat Poland 6-1. People forget Freddie Adu had a hat trick. Josie Ador had a goal. The next game, you beat Brazil 2-1. Altidore has 2 goals. So now the expectations, out of nowhere, all of a sudden you're in the next round. So share with us that journey, and obviously we'll get to the 2009 World Cup as well. So before we do that, hey Ryan, just so you know, because the coach, was with the former national team, I just had to, dress appropriate so you knew that. So go ahead, Thomas.
Well, yeah, I gotta just slap you on your wrist a little bit because you did great research. But I also I was the head coach starting in 2002. I took the under 20s to their first World Cup in 2003, and that team was Chet Marshall, Drew Moore, Ricardo Clark, Bobby Condu, Mike McGee, Clint Dempsey. That was a very good team. We lost in OT against Mascherano's Argentina under 20s in the quarterfinals. That team predominantly was college players. Fast forward to 2007, that's the tournament you're talking about, which is in Canada. Again, the axis was brilliant. Michael Bradley, Denny Satella, Freddie Adu, Josie Altidore, Robbie Rogers, Sal Zizzo. We beat Brazil, and that Brazil team, by the way, had Marcelo, Thiago Silva, Fernandinho, Joe, Pato. And I remember vividly, my 2 center backs were from Wake Forest by the name of Jules Valentin and Nathan Sturgis from, Nathan played either for Duke or I can't remember. And before the Brazil game, I said to him, do you guys want to, first I said, do you guys know Joe and Pato? And they went, no idea, coach. I go, well, Pato just got sold to AC Milan for 20 million. I cut some tape. Do you guys want to look at him? And they said no. And inside I'm going, I'm pissed. On the other hand, I'm going, I got to know the American mentality a little bit, so I didn't want to push it upon them. So we win that one 2-1. Fast forward to the round of 16, the team we're facing is Barney up front. And again, I got my two college guys going, who is Luis Suarez? And Luis Suarez just got sold to Ajax for like 20 million, and Cavani just got sold to PSG for 20 million. Back pocket, coach, no problem, whatever. Yeah, okay. So we beat Uruguay in OT. Michael Bradley scores the winner. And there's a big fight after the game because the Uruguayans are not great losers, in particular against the US. So we had a great pathway to get to the final because Argentina and Chile was Arturo Vidal, Alexis Sanchez, great generations, just like Uruguay as well. And on our side was the Czech Republic and Austria. So we could get to the final of an under-20 World Cup. How cool is that? And we get two great chances. This was in TO. It's wet, so the artificial turf. We get two breakaways with Freddie, actually. And he can't score. And it stays 0-0 for a long time. We eventually lose. And then Austria actually gets to the final, loses against Argentina, Di Maria and Sergio Aguero, for instance. So the selection process in my first go-around was predominantly going to college games, as many as I could, because that's starting 11, with the exception of Eddie Johnson. There were Bradenton at that time that probably had signed Jay Convey, had signed in MLS Santino, but the rest were all college guys. Whereas in 2007, that starting 11 had 9 professionals, all domestically. If you fast forward to our current crop, for instance, that under-20 team can be all guys that play outside of the United States. I mean, that's how far we've come from 202, 203, predominantly college game, to now where these 17, 18-year-old, be it Ricardo Pepi, be it McKenzie, be it, the list goes on, of guys that are eligible still for our under-20 team. Not all of them will get released. Not all of them want to go, obviously. But that's been a huge change and an incredible testimony to the development in the United States in the last 20 years have taken place, which is staggering, by the way. I found Clint Dempsey playing in a wild, illegal league with his older brother against a bunch of Mexicans in Nacogdoches, Texas, for instance, because somebody told me there's a talented kid that you should look at. His parents didn't have the means to drive him to Houston or Dallas to be part of at that time was the Development Academy. So there are some really cool stories how I unearthed, some of these guys out of nowhere. But yeah, we're going from, are you great? Okay. In college, Mr. Marshall at Stanford, white picket fence. And we used to travel. Marshall was wanted by Real Madrid. We played in Spain. We beat Uruguay. And his parents said, what are they offering? I said, well, it's a youth contract, close to $200,000 a year. And they said, Stanford's education is more money. And I remember Chet saying to me, I just bought a dog. I can't leave California, these guys had absolutely no interest in becoming pros. And the parents, as we know, and still are, at that time in particular, because MLS soccer, you couldn't earn a living out of playing soccer. So most parents were all focused on Division I, good educational schools, scholarships, end of story.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Talk about 2009, where, first it's in Egypt, in the Middle East. So I'm sure we would want to hear any security concerns that maybe you were scared of, or maybe the State Department was telling you about. You lose, you come out of the gate, lose 3-0 to Germany, come back, beat Cameroon 4-1, comes down to the game against South Korea. I'll let you, share with us, what happened there. But start with, in Egypt, just from, maybe stuff you're watching on TV or hearing about.
Yeah. 203, which is at the United Emirates. That World Cup got postponed for 4 months because of the Desert Storm war. So although we went there a
Yeah.
few months later, and just imagine, we flew, we got met by 3 CIA undercover guys here in the US that traveled with us to the United Emirates. We walk off the plane, there's guys, I mean, military sniffing dogs for bombs. We couldn't get out of a compound that didn't allow us to do anything. And for 17, 18, and 19-year-old kids, that was pretty intimidating. You know, we practiced with guys, you know, literally the whole field was covered with military. So that was our first thing that, you know, if you go to CONCACAF qualifying, I remember, you know, playing at Panama in a third game to get to the World Cup for 20,000 people, intimidating, where during the national anthem, the whole stadium goes, Osama bin Laden, Osama bin Laden. They throw coins at you. I mean, some guys were bleeding. Pretty intimidating, but yeah, Egypt was not easy either because of the political situation, and you know, we almost grew accustomed that undercover guys would be with us throughout in hotels while we traveled, as soon as be met by military forces of those respective countries as well. And that's not a fun way to prep for a tournament. In saying that, that was a, you know, you go, just like the Netherlands didn't make it to a World Cup. You got some good years, some bad years. That wasn't 2009. Wasn't a very talented group, and we paid for it because for the first time we didn't make it. Or under my reign, I went to 300 World Cups, didn't make it out of group play.
Yeah, which leads to 2011. The first 2 games obviously are winners. Then you got to play in Guatemala. You mentioned, playing in CONCACAF is definitely challenging. Share with us, that experience.
I said to very similar to the Panama City experience, but maybe tenfold. Small stadium, terrible field, packed house. So we're talking about 18,000 crammed in there. Very much an anti-American, not necessarily towards the players, but an anti-American sentiment. Again, during the national anthem, the Osama bin Laden, very, very loud. And I looked at my team, and I looked at 4 guys that I could tell. I said to my assistant coach, "There's 3 guys that are shitting themselves right now, and they won't reach them to." And we did shit the bed a little bit, and I think in those years we were a little bit naive, and I told myself if I keep my job, which I didn't, so Neil fired me I think a few days later. Thank God he did, because that's how I ended up in American Samoa, at the end of this ride. But my premise was, judge me on the amount of players I pushed through to the Olympic team and the senior team. And I dare to tell you that I'm in the top 1 or 2 throughout the under 20 World Cup history that has pushed most players up to the. And yes, we should come out of CONCACAF, but sometimes, in a one-off game on the road in a hostile environment. And they deserved it, Guatemala. Don't get me wrong; they deserved it today, but still thought it wasn't good enough, which was great too, because that was my 3rd under 20 World Cup, and I was ready for a little bit of a new challenge, quite frankly, which ended up being Toronto, where I was the academy director. Put American Samoa in there in 2011, which was a great experience. I'm trying to do a documentary, and now a full-fledged movie by Taika Waititi, and Michael Fassbender is playing me. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah, great segue. So let's talk a little bit about that, Thomas. First, people forget American Samoa is a U.S. territory, sort of like Guam. Sure. So what happened is the American Samoa government asked U.S. Soccer to help find a coach, and I'm gonna sort of let you take it from here. But before that, I want you to try to explain to us what the difference between Samoa is and American Samoa.
I have no fucking idea. One is a territory.
And moving into first place on the 3 Old Goalies guest list is Thomas Rongen.
One's got two names, one's got one name. It's simple.
That's right.
Correct.
One name.
I know, as you said, Greg. I mean, American Samoa is a territory. Samoa obviously is not. And in Samoa, that's where the 3 qualifying games took place. So our prep happened in American Samoa, and then we flew to Samoa. I'm telling you, that's a great. I remember getting a call from Sunil, and he said, "Listen, we're still paying you. You're sitting on your ass. Can you do me a favor?" I go, "Well, it depends on what it is," because I had a contract till the end of 2011. And he said, "Well, they need some help in American Samoa." So I remember looking back in Samoa. So about 10 seconds, she goes, "It's next to Fiji and it's in Polynesia." I go, "Yeah, I'll take it." Then the next day, I realized they're the worst team in the world, ranked last in FIFA, lost 31-0 against Australia, obviously, which is the worst ever FIFA qualifying defeat. Not scored in 17 years, not won 17 years. And then fast forward, we beat Tonga, and it becomes a world story. I played first transgender ever to play in a World Cup qualifying game. These 2 young English guys are there already filming this and turning it into a documentary that became some awards at Tribeca Film Festival, Sundance Film Festival. We went abroad, London Film Festival. And Taika Waititi saw that movie in 2015 and literally called me thereafter. Don't know how he got my number, and say, "My name is Taika Waititi." That's all he said. I had no idea who he was, to be real honest with you. He went, "I wanted my fat bastard friend Russell Crowe to play you in a movie I'm doing right now. I just finished Thor and Ragnarok that made $1 billion for Disney, but I didn't like it. I got to go back to my roots. And this should be a pretty good movie." So, it ended up being Michael Fassbender. Elizabeth Moss is playing in really great actors. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to open in theaters November 17th. The reason why I pushed it back is because I feel there's potentially awards, Emmys, Oscar awards, maybe in this film. The first film since Taika Waititi won an Oscar for Jojo Rabbit. He's brilliant, this guy. He's in the top 100 most influential people in the world, according to Time magazine. And I didn't know much about it till I started looking at his work, and his body of work is unbelievable. And you look at Fassbender, well, he's Magneto in X-Men. He's a warrior in 300. He portrayed Stephen Jobs, Steve McQueen, guy that went on hunger, Bobby Sands, that went on hunger strike in Ireland. So this is a very accomplished actor, 20 years younger than me, that is playing me, which is badass, I mean, that's everybody wants to say at one point in time. You remember the question 30 years ago when we were like, who you want to play you in a movie? Well, it's Michael fucking Fassbender, which is at my age, at 68, I'll take it. So I'm going to do some red carpets with Taika and Fassbender in September, and it's going to open in 2 big film festivals, probably in the top 3 biggest film festivals. I can't tell where yet, but it's going to be really cool.
Yeah.
And again, at 68, here I am.
Yeah, I just want to share with people what Thomas is really saying. They were 204th in the world when he took the team. They're playing the powerhouses of the Cook Islands and Samoa and Tonga, and all of those are the worst teams in the world. What people don't know is you had 3 weeks to put this together, and you get there, and as you mentioned, you had a transgender athlete who was man of the match, which is pretty incredible. Made history with that. Share with us, because you beat Congo 2-1, like you shared. You tie the Cook Islands 1-1 in a game you should have won, in your opinion. So now you're up against the rival in a packed stadium of about 200 against the rival Samoa. What's the feeling like knowing that, hey, you win that, you're moving on?
Correct. I said to my wife, I said, I hope we don't fucking win. I mean, I'm telling you, seriously, because the reason is when I did my research and I looked at some of those games, I go, there's properly that these are 12, 16, 18 nothing games. I knew I could close that gap, but I know I couldn't close the gap with New Zealand, Fiji, the upper tier teams in that region. That would have been double figures. That would have been an embarrassment. I go, this is perfect. We left a little bit of a legacy. There's more athletes playing soccer on the island right now. The president and the first lady came to Samoa to celebrate with us. We jumped from 203 to 187 in the FIFA rankings. I knew we couldn't do any better. It could only be, our asses handed to it, and then people are going to question, was it luck or whatever? So it was at 0-0. I don't know if you guys saw the documentary. We hit the post, and on the counter they score 1-0. So we easily could have been. And you look at Samoa, that was probably better than us, but we hang in there for different reasons. They lost by double digits in the next round, against Fiji and New Zealand, Australia. I was still part of that as well. So I knew this was it.
Yeah, and let's not forget
we played. I coached them to win. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I coached them to win, obviously, but I know deep down that would have been a tall order.
Yeah, let's not also forget. I think it's Vanuatu and New Caledonia. I think I could be blowing that, so help me here. But
Caledonia, yeah,
thank you. And you're right. I mean, you look at that next step, Thomas, and it's a different level. You're absolutely right. So I know John and Ryan have some questions, especially about your work with Bean and CBS. So I'm going to turn it over to you here, John.
Jesus. Thomas, I'm kind of the historian on this show, so I had like Renus Mickles questions, and now I have zero. I had a coach question, a fan question, and a geek question. But I'm going to ask you a fan question. What do you watch? Do you watch a league? Do you watch the EPL or the Bundesliga or Holland?
No, actually, you guys are killing me because I'm watching the Panthers in the Heat right now, and the Panthers. Can somebody tell me? There was 2-2 in the third period. I had to turn it off.
Panthers won in overtime.
Panthers
won in overtime. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Seriously. I'm a hockey guy, Thomas, and I think the Panthers are the team to beat this year.
They need to choke against the Leafs.
Come on, seriously.
They aren't going to choke against the Leafs.
I know. I need it though.
They are that team that is on a roll in the playoffs, and they're getting better every game.
Correct. I mean, 3-0. Not series, not over, but pretty much over.
Yeah,
wow,
it's pretty much
unbelievable.
Over.
So they beat the number one seed that had the best regular season in the history of the NHL, the Bruins.
Yeah, don't remind me of that.
Considered unbelievable. And their goal. That's one of those sports because you learn from every sport, where a goalkeeper can write you into the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Bobrovsky is right now incredible. So no, I because of being where I do the Turkish league and the French league, I study those two leagues a little bit in terms of my prep before. Yes, tomorrow I have a CBS show. I do U.S. men's national team players abroad. I do my MLS power rankings. I do sometimes top 5 European power rankings. I will talk tomorrow about the Champions League. I follow obviously my team Ajax, who are struggling this year. So I have a real wide span. I do every game for Inter Miami as well on radio, which is cool. So I've turned my passion into still a living, which is awesome. Every day I drive towards studio or to the stadium. Yesterday, Joseph Martinez scoring his 100th goal against his old team, Atlanta United. That was a great story, and I'm right there. So, yeah, I don't have a favorite league, to be real honest with you. I follow closely American players abroad in all leagues. So Leeds is an interesting story right now with big Sam Allardyce, and can they avoid relegation? So yeah, I do it all, and I love.
That's awesome. My last question is really a coaching question. I'm glad you brought up the goalkeepers in hockey, because we had a big howler from David De Gea at United today. How did you? It happens. It's a 24-foot target, and we've all had those balls bounce over our head, or like when I played in Miami against you and Steve Kinsey volleyed a ball off my forehead in Lockhart Stadium. You just kind of got to be in the wrong place at the right time. How did you treat a goalkeeper blunder? Just a blunder between the legs, or something we saw that happened to De Gea at United today?
Just like I treated a player that missed a penalty, which is clearly slanted towards the taker. Let's be real honest. And that's where you can make a real mark. I firmly believe that coaching, not just now, but even more so now, because the athletes are more complicated. But back then, I always had a very keen understanding. All the players that played for me, with a handful of guys that probably hate me, do respect me for the mere fact that I had a very human side to me, and I could put my arms around a shoulder. I would protect a team or a player, as I would do in David De Gea's case, and as Ten Hag has done as well. The only problem with David De Gea is it's not the first one this year. I mean, you could have one or two howlers. I've also made changes to a team where my goalkeeper, which I still to a certain extent believed in, but I could tell his teammates didn't anymore. After a fourth or fifth howler, even during a good run with DC United, I made the change in goal because I thought that our backup goalkeeper deserved, as he played in the Open Cup, to get a start. And then you have to be hard as well, because you always got to do what's best for the team. I think David De Gea is still the number one for Man United going forward. Might change in the offseason. Late in the game, I'm sure that Ten Hag doesn't want to throw him under the bus, because confidence is so important, particularly in your position as well. You're so isolated. I don't know what you're going through because I've never played the position, but I have a very, again, keen understanding, the psychological aspects of a goalkeeper, that one save could make you the hero, and one mistake could make you the GOAT as well. There's nothing really in between. Very isolated position. I feel for you guys. I mean, toughest position in the game, in my opinion, in terms of your prep, in terms of maintaining a level of concentration, even if you don't get the ball for long periods of time, and then being able to come up still with that big time save at 1-1 or 1-0 up to win 3 points. A good goalkeeper can win you single-handedly between 6 to 9 points a year. Easy.
That's a great point. And, it's tough for De Gea, too, because he's playing for a Dutch manager, and he's not really good with his feet. So they've got some decisions to make at United. Ryan, do you have anything for the gaffer here?
Yeah, before Ryan does that, I just want to interject this, get Thomas's opinion. Here with the three old goalies, we talk about the U.S. Open Cup a lot. And we've sort of been ahead of the curve where, first, there's not enough money, right? $300,000 for the winning team is really not a lot of money. And I'm going to let Ryan sort of talk a little bit about this because, Thomas, I don't know if you know about the tournament, the 77 tournament for $1 million. There's 32 teams in it. It's going to be taking place, in North Carolina. $1 million. Now, if we could pull those resources for the U.S. Open Cup, I think, and make sure the quality of the fields that we're playing on, the standard is definitely higher than some of these places that we've seen the games. I definitely want to hear your thoughts about that. I'm going to turn it over to Ryan in case he wants to add to that.
I think the important thing that I'd like to hear about, I don't know if you heard the quote from Don Garber this week about the Open Cup matches being played on subpar pitches, and it's not something they want their brand to be seen on. Did you happen to see that quote?
Yeah, but you know what? You got to read the whole quote. They just took out one sentence because he actually talks about he wants to promote the Open. Right now, it doesn't look good for our brand, but he's talking about bigger price. If you read the whole story with Don, he's actually saying, I want to help here. We need to get better in those areas. He touches on 2 or 3 areas where that now gets put in the newspaper. But yeah, listen, I'm from the Netherlands, where cup is huge. The FA Cup obviously is legendary.
Sure.
I played on lower division teams as a player against bigger teams. I've coached against bigger teams. I've coached against the smaller teams with my MLS teams. I won the majority of the games, but I lost a few times as well. In Rochester, for instance, better of my DC United team 1 year. And that's the beauty of the cup. It's unpredictable. It looks like right now what we got in the round of 32, we got at least two lower division teams playing each other. So one gets to the round of 16. You might get an upset 1 or 2 as well. Yes, it's been dominated by MLS teams, but there should be a bigger emphasis on all levels for that matter, including the USL, MLS, US soccer on the top of the pyramid.
100%.
To make this not only bigger prize money, but prize money does help without a doubt. Although the winner gets in the CONCACAF Club Championship, so that's also pretty big. But it's a pale in comparison to other top countries in the world. And if we keep saying, hey, we want to be and we will be part of the top 6 or 7 countries in the world after 2026. Now, one of the ways that you do it is by promoting your Open Cup on a much broader and higher level, no doubt.
What do you think would be? Let's say you're in charge of the Open Cup, or you're part of that committee, and you would want to throw one thing into it that you think could help, improve the tournament overall. What would that one piece be for you?
Round of 16 and beyond. The lower division teams are always the host.
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, love it. Love it.
I've been saying that for a couple of years.
That's it.
We don't
That's the key.
we do a pretty good job. Not all. There's a few outliers, but most of the MLS teams, in particular, the latest batch of new teams that have waiting lists for season ticket holders. Cincy sells out, Nashville sells out, St. Louis sells out with 42,000 for San Jose, LAFC, Atlanta's always 40, 50, Seattle. So let's give the Charleston Battery a home game against an MLS team where they can first and foremost make some money as well, invest it back into maybe their academies or their television rights have to go up. We got to find a real partner that really wants to showcase the US Open Cup with previews, just like we see with Apple right now. It's even hard to find. CBS got 2 or 3 games. These guys get 3 or 4 games. It's got to be all streamlined as well. And as I said again, we got to promote, in my opinion, the smaller cities, the smaller teams, because those are the better storylines, I think, in the US Open Cup.
Yeah. Since you mentioned MLS a little bit there, I want to jump in on the scheduling thing since you talked about MLS. Last night, they had almost all of their games at 7:30. Like, almost every single MLS game was played at the same time. So then today, there's no MLS game to be played in prime time. I know the deal with Apple TV allows anybody to watch whichever game they want. But do you think it's more important for more games to be able to be seen live than just going back and watching games on demand, or what's your feeling on that?
Absolutely. I remember back in the NASL days, we had like the Thursday night game of the week. Actually, early MLS as well, and people were looking forward to that. A slate
back on ESPN2.
ESPN2.
Yeah. A slate of games staggered a little bit on a Sunday as well. Do maybe 3 7:30 games, 3 10:30 games on a Saturday. Do a few on Sunday the same way. Fight one evening a week, Monday. Although you don't want to fight against Monday against the NFL, but there's ways, I think, for us. I hate it, quite frankly. That I have to rewatch games and pretty much know the result. And I think a lot of fans are complaining right now, why are they all on at the same time? Not only a fan of Cincinnati, I'm a fan of MLS, and I would like to see as many games live as I can. And St. Louis, with such a great atmosphere, I would love to see that game on a Sunday, and not being one of 10 games being played at 7:30 or one of 8, and then another 8 at 8:30. And it's hurting in all areas, I think. And I mean, let's be real honest. If the rumors are true, Apple is not too happy with the amount of season passes they've sold.
Well, part of it is being that you put it at a price point that's more than me paying for my Premier League, stream. Like that's part of my issue with it. As a big FC Cincinnati fan myself, like if they're not the free game to watch of the week and it's not a home game that I can attend, I'm at my local like Buffalo Wings and Rings because they're a official watch party of the club, right? Like I'm not paying the additional money for the service. Right. I already pay for Apple TV Plus, to add that extra piece of the subscription for me just wasn't worth it because I attend almost every home match when my kids aren't playing or I'm not coaching somewhere. And I've been able to make a road trip or two throughout the season, as we know. So it's just for me, it financially doesn't make sense. Yeah,
no,
I financially doesn't make sense.
But I do every game home and away from the stadium for Inter Miami, so I never get to watch it anyway. I'm going, why did I pay this? And then I hear from the great fan that most people that were radio TV guys got their pass for free. I mean,
and season ticket holders got theirs for free as well.
Yeah, they did, correct. Which is
this is the
smart,
first.
Actually,
this was one of the first years that we didn't do season tickets with FC Cincinnati, and it was just because of my coaching schedule and the kids' game schedule. It just doesn't work. And when that happens, like I'm sure there's a lot of people that are in that boat. But overall, I think the product on Apple TV hasn't been bad. The first week was rough. I've watched quite a few. They have like 6 games for free each week live. So anytime I can take a look at one of those, I've been watching it. But
hey, Ryan, let's ask Thomas, a little controversy. You had mentioned about the Philly Union Chicago Fire. So I'm going to sort of let you delve into that here for Thomas.
As someone who's coached the U20 national team, did you ever have a situation where a club wouldn't release a player for you guys to have with you for the World Cup, for the U20 World Cup?
Yes, there's always some MLS teams refused, but mostly foreign teams. I had Jonathan Spector, that was for at that time was at Man United, and I talked to Sir Alex Ferguson. And Jonathan, all the players want to represent their countries. That's something special for them. And in terms of their development, it's huge. And I can attest to that because I went to 320 World Cups, and I still talk to players and say the qualification process, the tournament itself, really helped me in my growth as a player, also as a person, with all the travel attached to it. Here Alex just said, Thomas, or not Thomas, Mr. Rongen. We booked 3 weeks for every player. That's from our academy to our reserve team, our first team, based on their schedules, obviously, the way the competitions run, and Spectre's vacation falls during the Under-20 World Cup. Well, by the way, is not part of the FIFA calendar, so we're not required to release him. So no, you won't have him. And I know Ezra Henderson played for me, so I get it a little bit as well. Ezra's under pressure right now, has done okay, but probably feels the pressure from above. He's got 2 kids, and I saw Inter Miami here, and in particular, Gutierrez is a big time player, a starter for him as well. And I don't think that he has the luxury to let these 2 guys go, because he loses a lot. He's not as deep. Whereas, although they don't spend that much money either, but Jim Curtin in Philadelphia have done an unbelievable job, obviously, in putting this Philadelphia squad together. That's been brilliant the last few years. Just came up short against LAFC again, with depth. And Jim thinks, because Jim was also, at the time that was in Toronto, the academy director for Philly. That's where he started, coached their oldest team. He understands, and he says that also in his interviews, how important it is for their development as well. So I do get Ezra. I might have at one time as a coach not released a player for a particular. I think that was actually senior national team. That was the senior national team. I had at one point in time at DC United had 5 guys that played for the national team: Eddie Pope, Carlos Yamosa, Jeff Agus, John Harks, Ben Olsen. I'm missing Roy Lasseter. And we had a tough stretch. That was a friendly game, so we, again, it's club versus country, and what happens that we loaned out to England, and Ben came back with a horrific injury that really derailed his. And DC United is paying him. Eddie Pope came back once or twice from national team duty and couldn't play for DC United for a month because he got injured with the national team. And when those things happen repeatedly, the ownership group and your president, more than anybody else, is starting to put pressure on you as well. And you're in the middle caught between players that want to represent their countries and management that says, we got to win games here. And if we don't win games, you're done. That's not an easy one. So I get Ezra Hendrickson. I get Jim Curtin as well.
Fair enough. All right, Ryan, you got any more questions that you want to ask or delve into?
This is a power rankings question. Cincinnati's for real this year, right?
Yep.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
I knew it was going to be a yes or no. Like, just watching them play, like 6 wins and 6 home matches. That one hiccup against St. Louis, but St. Louis is a very, very good squad. Like, I tell Greg, actually, I think St. Louis is probably the best team in the league, in my opinion. We've talked about that quite a bit, but I always bounce between I'm bouncing between New England, St. Louis, Seattle still seems really strong to me this year.
Not after today.
Yeah.
I don't know how Cincy does it. They beat actually Inter Miami, but throughout 90 minutes, out of nowhere they grind out a result. I know the coaching staff really well because when I was the chief scout, those guys were Bruce's assistant coaches when Bruce was the head coach and I was the chief scout. So all my scouting reports, I would deal with Kenny Arena, with Sorbs and all those Pat Moon and those guys. And I knew it back then they were assistant coaches that would make great head coaches going forward as well. And he's turned that team into first and foremost a tough team, to 2 or 3 difference makers that on any given day can get you a win as well. They won't blow your doors off. They're sometimes really happy about you can have the ball and we'll counter. We'll get out wide.
They did that against Louisville City in the Open Cup match, right? The whole match. Possession was like 75-25 at one point. And then they still were able to eke out the win at the end.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for that as well. You know,
I was gonna say I think Roman
because everybody.
Oh yeah. Last night for sure, Roman Saltano stood on his head a number of times, and then the Olympico from Acosta was just a ridiculous goal.
Correct. That's what I mean. They
just find ways to win, right? Like,
yep. And that's unique too, and special. You know, it really is. I mean, we can't all be romantics like Pep Guardiola. I can marvel in a defensive sound structure and grinding out 1-0 results. Since he does right now. I just wonder if he lets the shackles off, if this team has more actually in terms of quality could make for a more pleasing footballing affair. But you can argue against the results right now, no doubt. And
even when they're not scoring a lot of goals, they're making the counterattacks. Some of them are phenomenal. So, like for me, like Barreal on the outside is a difference maker. And Greg and I have talked quite a bit about Lucho just being the difference. He is the offensive playmaker, right? They're only as good as how good Lucho plays. And he had a chip on his shoulder last night. So, against his former club.
Yeah, and then you got the ability to due to your physical strength, set pieces, for and against, you're pretty good at. And anytime you go out wide, you whip balls in the cross. You get fucking two big boys attacking, the 80-yard box.
Santos and Vasquez, right? Those guys can finish. So, I'm excited about it. I think I have been pretty negative over the last few years until they brought in Noonan, and I said the day that they signed him, I was like, all right, let's build the statue. Because I had a really good feeling about it, and I'm glad it's worked out for him. I hope that they continue to move forward. But this in your power rankings, can we get a little bit of a preview of who you think is the best team in MLS currently? Where do you sit on that one?
They got a hiccup, but I think that LAFC has proven in the last 2 years that they are still the team to beat. Very good to win the Champions League. They had a little hiccup yesterday, but that was great too because San Jose absolutely deserved that one. But I know what it's like to play these big games, which they have, in the quarters and semifinals of CONCACAF. And then there's a letdown. You got to go on the road, and guys let their guards down a little bit. All of a sudden, 40,000 in the Levi Stadium. Well done, San Jose, by the way. But LAFC to me is the team to beat. The sleeper right now that I can't put my finger on, but Inter Miami plays them in the next game is Bruce Arena, New England. Again, he rolls out a young goal. This guy, there's 2 or 3 guys. A guy from Albania, a young American kid. The ability for Bruce Arena to find these gems and stick him in positions. Bruce is a great story because Bruce at UVA, his locker room or his office was next to the opposing basketball team's locker room. So his office, so he would listen pre, halftime, and post. And he said, listen, I learned more from the ACC coaches, how to deal with ups and downs and losses and X's and O's and other sports, he said. I said, what's important? He said, never put a player in a situation where they can fail. And I would question at times, why are you playing him on the left? And then 3 games later, I'm going, oh my God, he's the only one that saw that. It's pretty amazing. Had a down year last year, but I wouldn't bet against Bruce Arena's teams in MLS any given day. But LAFC is the cream of the crop. Seattle also lost yesterday, but still, if everybody's healthy and they're focused, are pretty good as well. I think with the fact that Philly finally is done with all these games that were very hectic for them, and they're not as deep as LAFC, for instance. and they after Carranza, and they don't have a really good third number 9, so to speak. So that's something for Jim Curtin that he needs to deal with. But I say that, yeah, those are the teams that I would put my money into to get to the finals this year.
Does Philly go out and get that 9 in the summer transfer window, you think?
They're funny, they don't spend a lot of money. They don't
tend to spend that money. Yeah.
No, they have done a great job in their academies, obviously. They got 3 or 4 guys that were standouts at the under 20 qualifying. I don't know if they got a 9 somewhere hidden, an 8, number 9 Aaron
playing on their U19 team or something.
But yeah, I think they should look at that in the next transfer window. Most teams will look at where they need to improve and try to do that, even though the financial restraints in MLS makes it very hard sometimes to improve your team and spend money.
Well, they've definitely got the space, the money. Like, it's a question if they want to.
No, I know they do. If they want to spend it, exactly.
Do they want to spend it? Yeah.
All right, John.
All right, guys.
Dad, yep, we're all good there. All right, cool. Well, our guest Thomas Rongen, thank you so much for being on here. The movie comes out in November. Little promotion on it. It's called Next Goal Wins. And again, Thomas, thank you for participating in this episode. Let's hand it.
Oh, so anyway, Greg Deutsch, man, thank you again for what an unbelievably prepared and great interview. I got chills the entire time. But you're being so prepared, and you knew. And I tell you what, Ryan, I did not know. I don't know if you knew this, but that Lone Starling, Mudbone, where did you dig that shit up?
Wikipedia.
Yeah, all over the place.
Well, I mean, we got to ask Butch Walker about that, because I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. I did not know about that league. That was so funny. I mean, I think the cool thing, obviously, we had a movie actor on, right? I mean, we don't get that on this show, right?
Yeah. And that documentary, he didn't mention this, but that documentary was also in Cannes, pretty important in the movie business. And then the new one, as he said, has been bumped a couple times, the movie with Fassbender, so they can get it in some big festivals. And I'm really hoping it comes to Telluride, because if it comes to Telluride, I try to go up there every other year. That would be amazing.
That would be.
To watch him, and maybe we'll get a little interview with him and Fassbender for the show. But I'm sure they'll fit us right in. And Ryan, your MLS insight was really, really good. And if you and Thomas Rongen are going to watch MLS, I'm going to watch MLS.
Yeah, we're going to have to. I'm going to have to bug him to get back on, because I know that he does those power rankings. Like, I've seen his power rankings for CBS Sports.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to just chime in. Like, it was kind of a cool moment, because I was like, this is the moment I finally have to be like, why in the hell do you rank these teams so high? Or like what? And I didn't go there, but like there are moments, and it's not just him. There are other guys that like work on MLS Soccer's website that when they put their power rankings out, like for the longest time, everybody's like, oh, FC Cincinnati's just a pretender. They're a pretender. They're a pretender. And I was like, guys, how long do you go until you go, okay, this shit's for real? Like they're playing real. Like
I think the answer is when they go on the road, right? The next,
they got a rough stretch. I mean, we have Columbus coming up, right? That game's always super physical. They hate each other. I mean, they legitimately hate one another. If you're going to watch one MLS match this year, Boa, it's that one to me. Well, and then maybe LA and LA Galaxy and LAFC. Those two teams, like those two matchups, those derbies, they hate each other.
Well, I know a lot of, since Chelsea's going to be playing in the MLS next year, there's a chance that I'll be watching some more games.
I mean, there'll probably be a number of Chelsea players that make their way over here. That's for sure. Once they get relegated, right?
Yeah, Everton and Chelsea in MLS. But guys, that was a great job. The other thing, a good takeaway from Thomas Rongen, Greg, especially for people our age, is the things he had to do to piece his life together, doing what he loved and what he was good at. I mean, you're hanging out with Gerd Mueller and Johan Cruyff. You got to absorb some things.
a player that EV coached at Duke named Brian Benedict, Nene Cabillas, basically took him under his wing when he was a little boy. And that kid was one of the most gifted. He was like a Tab Ramos skilled type player, had a bad knee injury, but a wonderful player from South Florida, won the national championship at Duke. He was my age, 86er. But the thing, Thomas is like, look, I coached a high school and I coached a club, and then the Strikers came back and they called me and I'd go back and do it, and he was coaching the Strikers in the shitty APSL when there was only 5 teams in the country. And Thomas Rungen's on the sideline when I told that little story about Kinsey smacking the ball off my face, and I'm like, this guy's seen everything. And you're like, oh, hi, Coach Rongen, but that's a really important thing for our arrogant era now. I think it's very arrogant, naive. This guy's seen and done it all, right, fellas?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I
really humble man, a real great reputation, a football guy. Just great job, and Ryan, great with the MLS stuff. So
we talk a lot about who right, and how you kind of like the connections and those things.
Yeah,
like he brought up Nathan Sturgis's name during the Clemson player, right?
Yep.
But if you look at Sturgis's MLS career, he played in Toronto, Houston, Chivas, like Seattle. Like you start the names of the teams that you're looking at who he played for, like all of those were mentioned by Thomas at some point because he was involved in them at some level somewhere along the way.
And he talked a lot about scouting.
Yeah.
Dempsey, one of the top 5 American players ever, scored goals in England. Liverpool wanted him at one point, and Thomas Rongen found him playing on a county park.
Well, and he traveled. I mean, he's talked about it. Dempsey's talked about it ad nauseum. Like his parents changed their jobs to trek him to and from training sessions that were like almost 2 hours from home, right?
Yeah.
Did he play for Lone Star Soccer Club? Was that his youth club?
He was a lot younger than me. I don't remember.
I'm not sure.
I can find that out while we're going, because I remembered it and then I drew the blank. But I think that's right.
Now remember, this guy, while you're doing that, got into Furman. That's where he played.
What?
Went to Furman.
Yeah, Furman.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and is also participating in the 7v7.
Yep.
Right, tournament that we're talking about.
His
youth career was with the Dallas
swimsuit issue.
The Dallas Texans was the club that he played.
Oh, there we go. Butch group. There we go.
Butchie group. Yeah.
Butch's group.
Yep.
So guys, this was going to be a really short twirl around the world because the John Boa Media Company had a really weird couple of weeks. We weren't really used to this thing called work. And for some reason, I had too much to do. So I couldn't get on the last call because of some storm coming off the mountain. Now there's a new one coming down the mountain, so I'm on my cell phone. So hopefully there's no delay. But I've actually been working, which is amazing.
That's a good problem to have, John.
Yeah, well, maybe.
It cuts in the number of random text messages we get from you in the day that we have no idea what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, well, work is secondary. There's football, there's sex, and there's breathing in that order.
All right.
I did want to start the show, and I'm a week late on this, but because we all love music, we got to give a shout out to our man Gordon Lightfoot, who passed away. And anyone who's worked a soccer camp and drank beer until 2 a.m. and ate pizza and told lies and stories and listened to stories has listened to Gord's Gold thousands of times. May Gordon Lightfoot rest in peace. And there is a long history of music and football collaborations, as we all know. Liverpool's John Barnes tried to rap for a while. That was horrendously horrible. Kevin Keegan had a serious singing effort. That was worse than horrible. But there are 2 pieces of world-class brilliance in football with real music. So you guys will remember the 82 film Goalies that Sean Connery was the narrator when he said that famous line about the French sent home someone because they were having an affair with the captain's wife, Madame Platini, and he goes, "Football's not always about diagonal runs." It's one of the best lines ever. But Rick Wakeman from the band Yes did the soundtrack for Golay, and it won an Oscar.
Wow.
Very cool musical fact about football. And then the other thing is that even though Gordon Lightfoot was Canadian, he wrote the official song of the U.S. Soccer Federation called "The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald."
Yes, and it is his biggest hit. It reached number 2 on the Billboard charts in 1976.
How did he know that it would apply to that office in Chicago? Moving on. I wanted to touch on this Barcelona kid that made his debut at 15. Lamine Yamal. His parents are from Equatorial Guinea and I think Morocco, maybe. And he was born in Spain. And I looked it up actually, and there were 3 other younger kids in early 1900s that played for Barcelona, but they were amateurs. But this kid is a tall, slender, very eloquent, languid player, all left foot, 15 years of age. He could be, he's like a Paul Pogba in body type, better with the ball. I was watching some highlights of him, and the guy on YouTube said, I couldn't find any highlights of this kid touching the ball with his right foot. I'm like, Messi did okay with one foot. So did George Best. So you guys need to check this kid out. 15 years old at Barcelona. Meanwhile, kids in our country that are that age are playing for Sunset Country Day School and Rydell Senior High. So again, we really need some help from Chicago on getting our young players exposure. Thomas touched on it in his thing. The under 20s, great group, bad group. Now it has evolved into overseas kids. I get it, but he was saying the exact thing we say on this show all the time, and that is we need to, keep them going.
Well, that Rydell Senior High team, John, though, they would be really good if they just had Danny Zuko.
Yeah,
if he would just settle down and play the game instead of chasing around Sandy all summer.
He just smoked too much.
Yeah, that's right.
I did want to mention one more thing that has to kind of do with Barcelona, and I didn't even really know this. I was listening to Talk Sport this morning before I ask a panel question. But Barcelona has already won the league with 4 games to spare. Okay, I thought 3. Anyway, they've won the league. But they've already played 33 league games and they've won the league. And everybody talks about Barcelona keeping the ball and all this blah, blah, Johan Cruyff and all this. How many goals do you guys think Barcelona has allowed in their 33 league games?
This season?
12.
In 33 games, I'm going to say it's 10.
It's 11.
Damn. Look, that's the difference.
The guy on TalkSport said 9. The guy on TalkSport said 9, and the Spanish reporter corrected him. It is 11. So again, it's a simple game. If you let in not many goals and you score a lot more, what's Manchester City's goal difference is 49. It translates into wins. The other thing about that is Ter Stegen, the goalkeeper, Neuer broke his leg. The German goalkeeper who's been there since 1952 after the World Cup. He broke his leg skiing. He's not going to play till next August, and he's probably not going to play for Bayern. This could finally be Ter Stegen's chance to get there and be the real number 1 for Germany, because the Germans don't like to quit on a goalkeeper. Once they pick a guy, they're going to play a couple of cycles. Ter Stegen's only 31 years of age. We have a short World Cup, so the next World Cup's 2020, right around the corner. So he'll be 33. Then he'll be 37. So he can play in the United States and then play one more time. And the Germans, as sure as you're born, are going to recover from his last 2 cycles. Trust me. How many times have we seen that, Bone?
Too many.
Too many.
Barcelona also has that 19-year-old goalkeeper sitting kind of back waiting, right? Is it Estrelaga?
Yeah, I have not seen him play.
Really young kid, but by all accounts, looks pretty solid.
And Ter Stegen came from one of my favorite football club names of all time. And I'll give you guys a minute to think about yours. But one of my favorites is Borussia Mönchengladbach. And those of you that watched Toby Charles growing up will remember him talking about Stuttgart and kickers and Mönchengladbach. But I, there's a lot of famous German goalkeepers, especially from the green shirt era, as we call it. And the only one I could remember is Uwe Kamps, but he's my age. He's like 57, 58 years old. But I forgot, I had to find this too. Casey Keller was there for a while. And I did not remember that.
And he wore a green shirt, right?
I guess he did. He wore a green shirt. And Mönchengladbach, and of course their most famous player, the Mönchengladbach's most favorite player is Bertie Volks, German legend. Anyway, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But it could be Ter Stegen's turn. I do not know. But again, all this brings back the same old thing we have about the pyramid. We got this kid playing in Barcelona at 15. Of course, the idiotic media is already calling him the next Messi, even though he looks or plays nothing like him except for the left foot. The U.S. Open Cup, we need direction. You guys already hit that with Thomas really hard, which was excellent. Thank you very much. So I don't want to talk about Don Garber again. One thing I did want to mention.
I do want to hit one thing in the Open Cup, though, because Thomas did mention it, but we didn't say who it is. Birmingham Legion FC and Memphis 901 FC are the two teams from the USL that play one another. So we'll definitely have one in the round of 16.
So it's already the round of 16. Okay, makes sense.
No, yeah, this is round of 32. And then this set of matches, we have one guaranteed USL team that'll make the round of 16.
Fair enough.
Others that have,
and you notice that Thomas said that have the little guys host the games, Greg. That's brilliant.
Absolutely.
We've been saying that for 2 years.
And the USL's got to love this, right, Ryan? Because Birmingham to Memphis is not that far, right, from an expense standpoint, right? So it's not a California team, et cetera, et cetera. So, is that a rival game? I don't know. We'll see about the crowd.
It's going to be like Slapshot, Bone, with the school buses and the groupies going from Memphis to Birmingham. That's SEC country. They do that all the time.
3 hours and 32 minutes.
There you go. That's enough
drive between those two cities.
But to that point,
only crappy thing, it's a Wednesday night, I believe, that match.
Well, another mistake. But midweek games, those are cup games, and that's being a pro. You play midweek cup games. You go to Europe, Mexico, or Canada. You play your league games on the weekend.
It's just really hard to make a 4-hour trek midweek.
Well, that's what vacation days are for.
It's a vacation. I'm a soccer coach.
But to this end, just to kind of put a bow on the pyramid and the multiple competitions and the Open Cup in Europe, we've talked about this Dutch club AZ Alkmaar, which is kind of in the industrial part of Holland. Kind of like Gelsenkirchen in Germany, and they're playing West Ham from England, who kind of got out of the relegation zone today in England. But now West Ham can concentrate on their European semifinal on Thursday. And yes, it is the third tier, but guys, this is real football. And it's a European Cup semifinal, first leg. But the cool thing about the Alkmaar club is, guys, this is the club, and I think one of you brought it up, or I brought it up on a previous show, that 49% of their players are homegrown and make it to the first team. And then if you include players that they don't think are going to make it, they go to another club or they sell, it's almost 60%. So it can be done for a club that you've never heard of. When I first saw that, I didn't really remember them, and I thought they were Turkish. And I'm like, how the hell is a Turkish club doing it, But the proof's in the pudding. If they can do it, the Wilmington Hammerheads can do it. So we just need somebody that has the patience and the foresight. So again, playing West Ham United from England so now let's talk about all we're going to talk about, because Germany, I don't know, France, who cares? Spain's over. The English Premier League, because I speak English, is what I watch the most. It just so happens it's the best league in the world right now. And this year in particular, and it's always been tough, really shows you what a fine line it is between winning in 6th place or 12th and getting relegated. We've seen Arsenal beat everybody like a drum, play some beautiful football. They've dropped 9 points in 4 weeks. They're done. Manchester City doesn't give up leads. Arsenal's done. United had a 12-point lead over Liverpool 3.5 weeks ago.
It's now 1
point.
1.
Now United has a game in hand, So Liverpool will play Saturday, and they will go up by 2 points, and then United will play on Sunday, I think. No. United plays first, and Liverpool plays Monday. So United, that's gonna be their game in hand. So it'll be interesting to watch that because it's going to be like this for a while until they get all caught up on the 20th. But really neat, and it just shows you, everybody talks about Ten Hag at United walking on water, and how much Arteta has learned being Pep Guardiola's assistant and playing for Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. Well, fellas, when our golfing buddies say what? Drive for show and putt for dough. It's April and May. You can't drop points. And especially against a team like Manchester City, who could beat like Jesus and the 12 disciples. Okay. So even without God on the sideline. So we got to, really get some perspective here, how hard it is to win at this level. And it really has nothing to do, I know, Ryan, you're a United guy, but it really has nothing to do with Liverpool's resurgence. Liverpool's got the easiest run in of anybody. They got 3 games in a row at home. They just won them all. But if you look at these other teams' schedules, they are brutal. Brighton's got to play 2. They got to play all 3 of the top 3, 2 away from home. That's not going to end well for them. Chelsea has won their first game since February. So they scored their first goal in 3 weeks, and they won their first game since February. Poor Frank Lampard. So they'll be playing in the MLS next year when they get relegated. Everton, brutal. And the reason I kind of looped Chelsea and Everton together is because these are the warning shots that the owners do not want to see. And these kinds of struggles are ultimately going to form this NFL of Europe. Hey, I just spent $6.3 billion on Manchester United. If we get knocked down and we're playing Bolton on Saturdays and Dagenham and Redbridge on Friday nights, I'm not going to make my money back. So it's unfortunate. Everton would be bad enough, but a Chelsea friend of mine, real good friend, said, we were doing some math, and if the season had 41 games instead of 38, that Chelsea would be in real trouble of going down. Chelsea.
Well, and they've had a rough run over the last few weeks.
But they've also spent, not to mention what they spent for the club, but they've spent $590 million on players.
Well, they have the worst manager in football.
Well, there's some bigger issues there. The owner coming in and talking about stocks and bonds to his multilingual locker room probably isn't the best idea either. And then of course Newcastle got turned over at home today by Arsenal. Tough result for Arsenal. They're tough kids. They're just not going to be good enough to win the league. But Newcastle's been right there. So you got half the league. So there's 20 teams. 8 to 9, maybe even 10 teams could be playing on Labor Day weekend. They all kick off at the same time. There's only 3 games away. Could be playing for millions of dollars and maybe 4 or 5 trophies, because you've got Manchester City's in the European Cup, the FA Cup finals, and they're going to win the league. So they can win a treble. Then you got West Ham in the Europa League, Conference League. So that last weekend, and that, because the FA Cup this year isn't until June 3rd, and the European Cup is way late, June 10th. It's going to be really interesting. But think about a time when half the league, I'm not talking about the guys 13, 14, 15th place. I'm talking about the guy. I mean, it's going to be bloody.
What are your thoughts on the teams coming in, John, as far as Sheffield United and
So we got, that's a really good question. We got Sheffield United, who was this close to going to the FA Cup semifinal or final. I can't remember when they got knocked out. And that's a very famous football city, Sheffield Wednesday, who John Harkes played for, and where they had the big nightmare incident with Liverpool years ago. But Sheffield United is going to be tough to play against. And then Vincent Kompany, the Belgian defender that was at City forever, is the manager of Burnley. Burnley's coming up. And I don't know if a lot of people in this country don't watch the championship, but it is fast and it is direct. And once they come into the league, if they don't get all playing at Old Trafford, then they could cause some damage. And a lot of people think Burnley might be up to stay for a while. You might remember Norwich was up and down, up and down, up and down for a while. Fulham was like that. Fulham is now playing very well. Brighton is one of the best teams in Europe statistically, which is unbelievable. I don't know if you guys have watched them play, but this Alistair kid, the Argentinian in midfield that Liverpool wants to pay like 80 million for, is a great player. They beat United the other day. And this Paraguayan kid Inciso up front is silky with the ball. Like he plays kind of a reserve number 9, and sometimes they let him jump up on the last defender. I mean, they've got some good players, and they were very cocky against United. They were like putting their foot on the ball and looking around and knocking it. It was kind of interesting. But you know, they have a tough run in. But yeah, and who's the third team? Do we know? Or are they in a playoff?
Playoff. Luton Town is one of the. It's Luton Town and Middlesbrough, I believe.
Okay, so Middlesbrough has one of the best academies they're used to in Europe, and then Luton, is in London. That Luton airport is a nightmare.
Well, Luton Town also has the stadium that looks like it's in somebody's house.
There we go.
Like the gate, no joke, the gates. Like so when I saw that they might have a chance of coming up, I called friend of the show, Jurgen Sommer, and said, "You played there, right?" And he was like, "I sure did."
You sure did.
And I was like, okay, so are these videos that they're showing of the stadium where it looks like you're walking into somebody's front door to get into the gate of the stadium legit? Like you walk in and then there's like scaffolding that gets you to the seats.
So amazing. I've never been to the stadium.
Like I saw this video. It was somebody posted it on, it was either TikTok or YouTube or something, where they were showing like the walk to get into the stadium. They're like, this stadium is going to be in the Premier League next year, quite possibly.
And, we had Jurgen on the show. Greg Deutsch got on the show a couple years ago, right, Bo?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was great.
He played at Bolton, too. Yeah,
he was great.
Since we did have a Dutch guy on the show and he brought up total football, I don't know if you guys saw Ted Lasso last week, but they talked about total football.
They did. They did.
Kind of oversimplified it. But, again, that show is not about soccer. It's about being nice to people and caring about people's feelings. But it's nice that they brought up total football, which brought me up to my favorite system or misnomer in the world, which the Italians call catenaccio, which literally means door bolt or the lock. And a lot of people misconstrue what this means. And you both coach, EV coaches, used to coach, I used to coach. So I wanted to kind of just clarify this, and maybe somebody out there will actually take the time to figure this out. The catenaccio, or the lock, the Italians call it, is not packing it in, or what they said about Jose Mourinho, parking the bus. It is about nullifying opportunities to score. So that meant not necessarily playing defensively like a Christmas tree and just letting them serve balls like Normandy all day, or letting them keep the ball. It meant whatever the other team did well. So you might have to lock down their midfield, and you might let them play in behind you. Now, most Italian goalkeepers are liners, so a lot of them didn't do that. But that by no means does that mean that that's the way the Italians play. Jurgen Klopp attributes Arrigo Sacchi, the famous AC Milan manager, with being what he emulated and how he developed his pressing game, what the Germans call Gegenpressing. Sacchi was an Italian guy, and he believed in taking young players and running them into the ground and causing panic everywhere. So it's something to, another thing, when the United States national team and you're playing Holland in the World Cup, it might have been smart to think that way rather than go, hey, we're just as good as Holland. So that's the only reason I bring up systems. We had a Dutch guy on here, and I always like that word catenaccio because it is about results in the tournaments, right?
Am I correct in the catenaccio being the system that pretty much introduced the sweeper or the libero? Yes. Is that correct?
Libero, yeah.
Libero.
And then when Beckenbauer got a hold of it, he became like the attacking one, right, Bone? He became more, I'm just going to go because nobody can account for me.
No one's going to account for me.
Exactly right. Yeah. It's what kind of like the football people, the American football people, they call the linebacker the spy. So when you have these new quarterbacks that are so mobile, they sit there and their job is the quarterback, so they mirror the quarterback. And nobody was thinking that way, and Beckenbauer would just take off and score goals. Very, very interesting. But anyway, I love this show so much because we have fun but we talk about real things, and young coaches should know, look, there's no rule that says you got to take the ball to the end line and cross it to score a goal. I mean, every top team in the world right now is playing left-footed wingers on the right-footed wingers on the left. And Alex Ferguson was doing that with Giggs and Beckham 30 fucking years ago. So we got to throw the books out the window.
I'm doing it right now with U10s.
we need to watch more games, and we need to say, I don't have the players that can beat people for pace and can get it to the inline and pop it back in. But I have guys that can beat guys one-on-one in tight spaces. Maybe I'll just change the way I play. So there's always a way to win a game. And as a Brazilian guy said when I first got out of college, I say this all the time. He goes, it is never the player's fault. And Thomas Rongen said this similarly tonight. Put a guy in a position where he's going to be successful. Now, Bruce Arena was listening to the visiting locker rooms, which, by the way, at that time in basketball was Dean Smith and Mike Krzyzewski. Mm-hmm. So, he learned a little bit. And that's very cool that he said that. But you put a player in a position to be successful in how you're going to win a game. And that doesn't mean that you have to do certain things. You watch games and just change it. Be creative. So anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. The total football got me thinking about that. And yes, we all love Ted Lasso, but it's not about football. I had some Thomas Rongen questions, but I was so intimidated I didn't ask any one of them. So I wanted to end up with this, Greg and Ryan. So the 3 old goalies. In 5 years, Paramount buys the rights to this show, and they're going to cast each one of us in who's going to play us 4 in the show. So I'm going to go first on the people that I picked to play the 4 old goalies here, the 3 old goalies and our producer. And then you guys can take that minute. So those of you that are listening, we did not rehearse this or prepare this. I'm putting them on the spot. So here's what I picked for the movie version of the 3 old goalies. And what I was thinking for a name, what it would be the 3 old goalies.
I mean, okay. That's original. All
right.
That's good.
So the first one is Ryan. I picked you for Paul Giamatti.
That's a good one.
Because you're quick on your feet, you're a linguist, is an Oscar-winning actor. Somewhat of a resemblance, I think.
So can I say who I would pick for myself?
Go for it.
Kevin James.
Kevin, I don't know who that is. The only Kevin James I know is the guy from the UPS show.
Did you ever watch King of Queens?
Yeah, that's who I thought that was.
That is who it is. But
bring that picture back up.
He's thinned out a little bit. Now he's got a beard.
That's Kevin James.
Yes.
What's an old picture look like, Ryan?
He looks a little not like that.
He looks really thin.
Because Leah Romani was super hot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on. Here we go. I found one. I had to dig real fast.
There you go. The King of Queens. So Paul Giamatti, Ryan, Kevin James.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
So good. Mudbone, for you, kind of an actor. He's been in some movies, but not really. But a penultimate, because you love music so much, music guy, multi-billionaire producer. I thought, because they used to do this great show we were growing up called Raider Record on Saturdays on American Bandstand, playing Greg Deutsch, Dick Clark.
He dead, yo.
But he did.
But I was like, that'd be great, but he's dead.
I know. But anyway, so Greg, do you have any thoughts on who we like to play?
Yes, I do. Billy Crystal.
Wow.
All right.
Wow, that's so good.
What about can we have Ryan Seacrest play Greg, because Ryan Seacrest replaced Dick Clark on New Year's Rockin' Eve?
Well, first of all, Greg Deutsch is not a douchebag asshole.
Oh,
so we're gonna
come
on. Billy Crystal.
Right.
And another cool thing, I don't know if you guys have seen Billy Crystal do the thing at Muhammad Ali's funeral.
Yes.
It is one of the coolest, funniest things you will ever see. It's amazing, but you need to look that up. For EV, I picked Ray Donovan, Liev Schreiber.
Liev Schreiber?
You know who Liev Schreiber is?
I do not.
Okay, there's a show on HBO about a mobster, Greg, called Ray Donovan, and he's like a tough guy, but he talks with this real deep voice, and he's a big square guy like EV. But if you imagine EV in his coaching heyday with the handlebar mustache, I'm telling you, this guy would scare the shit out of you.
Hold
And
on, I
it's
got
perfect. Yeah. So we need to get a picture of that up on the website. But Lev Schreiber, and we'll see what EV says about that. There we go. Yeah. So that would be like a 38-year-old, 45-year-old EV right there.
Okay. All right.
And then I thought about myself, which I know isn't fair because you guys didn't get to do it, but it is my segment, so I'm going to fucking pick the actors I would want to play me. So really, what does an actor do? An actor pretends to be something that they are not. So I thought the first person I would pick to play John Boa would be Don Garber, commissioner of the MLS. Because he's pretending to run a league and he's pretending to know about soccer. So if he can do that, he could easily play me. Fair?
I mean,
Well, I couldn't say that while Thomas was on because he could lose his job. Or I was thinking maybe Cindy Parlow, the president of U.S. Soccer, or this guy Will Wilson, who's the CEO of U.S. Soccer. I don't even know who that is or what he does. But those three people, Cindy Parlow, Garber, or this guy Will Wilson, who is the CEO of U.S. Soccer. One of those three actors could easily play John Boa. But if I had to be serious, I was going to say Woody Allen.
Oh my gosh.
Because he has the best line ever. 80% of life is just showing up. So if you just show up on time with a smile on your face and you add a little bit of cleverness,
all right.
Woody Allen.
I got mine. Unless Ryan, you got yours.
Go for it.
Yeah, good.
Michael Keaton.
Okay, Batman. I like
Batman. Yeah, no, that would be a good one. But can we get him when he's like not in the Batcave? Like we got to get him in some other like Mr. Mom. I want the Mr. Mom Michael Keaton, not the Batman Michael Keaton, right?
Like you remember that movie Night Shift he did when he and Fonzie were the Undertakers? It was hilarious. They were running a brothel out of a morgue. Michael Keaton's a good one. Thank you, Bone. That's a word.
Yeah,
that is a good one.
All right. But other than that, the U.S. soccer thing and the MLS thing is driving me crazy, and it doesn't keep me awake any night anymore. But I need to figure out a way to help. They just remind me of the guy that everybody brings beer to a party or a bottle of wine, and then at the end of the night, there's people that go in the fridge and they take their beer that's left and take it home. That's what these people remind me of. Or your roommate that leaves an empty carton of a 12-pack of beer in the fridge. So you think there's beer in the fridge, but then you're like, oh, you go to the store. I don't need beer because Steve left the beer. And then you go to grab a beer and it's an empty carton. That's what the United States reminds me of when it comes to soccer. There's nothing there. Or they take it sucks.
Are you excited about the men's under-20 World Cups that started? It started today, right, Ryan?
It started today, and I know nothing.
So.
And I'm going to read on that this week because I'm going to talk about it next week.
All right.
But did you hear when Thomas Rongen was talking about the under-20s, the players they were playing against? Mascherano, who's probably his transfer fees added up to about $200 million. The defensive midfielder played all over Europe. Luis Suarez and all the Brazilians. That's unbelievable.
The Chad Marshall statement was hilarious.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, so the U20 World Cup technically starts the 20th.
Oh, why did I think
May.
today? Why did I think
so?
Okay.
Well, I think they had a friendly. Didn't they have like a friendly this week? Just
U20s 20 May. So we will do a U20 preview maybe next weekend.
Yeah. So now the interesting part of when he was talking about some of those names and knowing that we beat them in a lot of cases at U20.
Yeah.
I wanted, and I didn't ask because I didn't want to sound like a jerk, but I wanted to ask what happened between when they were U20s and then they were on the senior team.
I can tell you exactly what fucking happened. College soccer or the APSL. I mean, that's why he said that now our kids are overseas.
Yeah. And I wanted to kind of dig into it a little bit more, but I knew we were kind of on a little bit of a time crunch at that point in the show. And I was like, oh, I would love to get into this question because I think that we know that the kids that are playing on the and I say kids because they are to us, I guess, on the U.S. men's national team at this point, they're playing overseas at a very young age instead of going and playing in college in a lot of cases.
Well, Bone, you remember when our U15s and U17s would go to the quarterfinals and the semifinals.
Absolutely. I think it's a mixture, Ryan, of overseas and certainly the academies, as you and I've discussed before. And you're seeing it more from the homegrown players and through there than actually the kids going overseas at this stage right now. They're getting some MLS time, as you know, we're seeing. So obviously that's going to be the continued path of the program.
But how does that work though? When they're starting this tournament May 20th, every league in the world is still playing, and the MLS is not even in the middle of their season yet. Are there any under 20s making an impact in MLS?
Yeah, Chicago, and that's why they're not letting them go.
Okay, so yeah, that's yeah.
I mean, that's Chicago's roster is so light that they couldn't let them go. If they would be letting 2 of their 11 go if they did it.
Well, then it's not a serious tournament. It's like the Olympics. Then nobody else takes the Olympics seriously except us and the women. So.
Yeah. So let's just go back to the U17s for a second. Who is the most successful team in the U17 World Cup? Who has the most titles? Do you think?
Spain or Brazil?
All right, Greg, what do you think?
Japan or Ghana?
No, U17. Ooh. It's somebody that we're not going to think of.
Yeah, there are some weird
Nigeria.
That's it, Greg. Nigeria. You're right.
Yeah, there are some weird winners. Yes.
Yeah. So Nigeria has 5. Props. Brazil has 4.
Give me props.
Big time.
Yeah, I mean that's a big one. I wouldn't have guessed that. Like I looked and was like, oh, okay. Definitely not something that I expected.
Super Eagles.
Super Eagles. Green Eagles.
I mean, there's
Green Eagles.
So if we go to the U20, who do you think has the most at U20?
Spain, Brazil, or Germany?
Argentina.
England won it.
Damn, Greg, how do you know these?
England won it for the first time, only time, I think, like 4 or 8 years ago.
Greg got it like right on. He said Argentina.
Yeah.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, like
that makes sense.
You got it. Now the current U20 champion is kind of off the wall as well. The Ukraine holds the current.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then the one that's real interesting for me, and this, I don't know if you guys will even on the women's side, U17s. Most successful teams.
Sweden.
Norway.
What's the difference?
Spain.
Oh.
And North Korea.
Wow, that is weird.
North Korea has 2 U17 championships in the women's side.
That's really weird.
Like that one, I saw that and went, wait, that can't be right. Like I had to do a double take on it. But yeah, so not one that I expected. But there's a lot of really good soccer played at those tournaments, even though like some clubs aren't letting their players go. So the U20s will be a good watch.
Because FIFA recognizes the Olympics for men, not women, for men as a under 23 tournament, I think.
Yes.
Okay.
For the men, yes, and the women, it's open.
Okay, but it's a real thing for the women. It's the women World Cup teams playing it.
You're right. Right.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's it, boys. That should wrap it up. I mean, I'm gonna have to split this baby up. We're probably gonna do a 2-episoder for this one, which is fine.
Well, y'all were both great, and that was the Rongen thing. Bone was tremendous. Yeah, I mean, I know who he is, but obviously he doesn't know who I am, which always makes me think of 2 things. Like, I think for people like him, he needs to know that there's a lot of people like us out there that know who he is already. And also that for me, it tells me that there's a lot more people that should know who he is.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So John Boa, you got a week. We are supposed to have next week, Joey Elsmore.
I will be there. I've got Joey's cell phone number. I can do a little of my own thing, but he's a Jersey boy that came to North Carolina, like so many of our friends did, to play college soccer. That'll be a good one. And
Yes.
ran Nike promotions forever.
Yes.
We're not limited on scope either, right? We can, because he's no longer with Nike.
Right.
He right.
He
I don't
could
think
say I can't answer that, but there's no
Right.
question that limits.
Yeah,
Right.
right. I think what he shared with me was about money, so I'm not sure what he meant. So
Well, he probably can't tell you what they paid for Manchester United, but we can ask him.
no, but he could give us. That's funny you say that because I definitely want to know what you've just sort of alluded to. What do they pay for a national team? How do they determine? Ryan, you've talked about some things with me that would expand into this from CONCACAF, but it would be more maybe in him. Why'd they sign that player? Now he won't maybe say how much they exactly signed for, but again, if he could give us a range, that's all we want without him quote unquote getting in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even necessarily want to know the dollar amounts. I want to know what
I
goes
do.
into.
I
wanna know-
But a lot of the dollar amounts are public for the pro teams and the national teams. That's not but the players and Nike is one of the reasons they're successful fiscally, even in down times, is because they build in the cost of their athletes into the landed cost of their product. So when everybody else is saying, okay, the shoelace costs this much, the eyelet costs this much, the upper and the outsole costs this much, then we put it together, then we put it on a boat, then we get it to Long Beach, California, then we get it to the warehouse in Ohio, and then we get it to Greg Deutsch's wall. There's all those stages of different pricing. In that process, Nike builds in the money they're going to pay, Serena Williams and Andre Agassi and Ronaldo.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My big question is Nike even remotely interested in the MLS jersey deal?
Nike is the marketing company. They're going to do anything that's going to make them money.
I'll try to answer that
And that's
myself.
We know that
we know
Adidas just re-upped it, right?
They are, but it's a fight of who gets what cities, and they don't want to go down that path.
Yeah. So if you look at the way Nike does the English Premier League, so they have Barcelona as a global icon, but then they have local teams like Tottenham is a local team, Chelsea is a global team, Liverpool is a global team, Barcelona is a global team, Real Madrid for Adidas is a global team. Then they break it down by London, Tokyo, Munich, Los Angeles. So that's what Greg's talking about, or what Ryan's talking about.
Yeah. I think the thing for me is like nobody would have at Nike could have possibly thought that FC Cincinnati was going to have the highest selling jersey in the United States when they came into the USL. But there's no way anybody at Nike.
That's the highest selling jersey, American jersey too. That's not
right.
I totally agree with you, Ryan. No one would forecast that at all.
No one would have forecast that. You're like, and then they're like, hey, we're going to release an alternate. And then they sold out within less than 24 hours.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, I guess we have to release more. And then those sold out. And
but we're also talking apples and oranges. We're talking like the same way that Nike or the media has blown the Women's World Cup way out of proportion. It doesn't create 100th of the revenue the men's does at the retail level. Right. So, yeah. So anyway, we can talk about that next week. But that's good stuff to know, Greg. So that's 2 weeks, Greg, right?
No, next week.
Next week.
Oh, I thought you said the 20th.
No, I didn't say anything. I said next week.
13 May. All right.
Yeah, the 20th is the 20th we're referring to is the U20 Men's World Cup start date.
Well, I will be in Atlanta that weekend. And Brian, I'm going to an Atlanta MLS game. I'm sitting in the UPS box. So I will record a promo for you from the MLS, from the UPS Brown box at the Atlanta Stadium on the Wednesday, the 17th of May.
Do we need to hook you up with Billy Hartman?
I got his number.
Okay.
But the UPS guys are taking me. So I'll hopefully if he's there, I'll get him to come up and have a beer with us.
So we'll be able to track you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
just begins with a Z.
Since you live in Boulder, are you going to wear a Colorado Rapids kit to that match since that's who they're playing?
I'm a Liverpool supporter.
I don't care.
He didn't ask that.
That wasn't my question.
Well, and also I'm also a gentleman, kind of. So I don't wear away shit to other people's stadiums when they invite me. I'm a guest. I am a guest of Atlanta UPS. I'm not going to wear a Colorado jersey and be a jerk off like the New Jersey Devils guy in Raleigh last week.
I mean, I'm that jerk off. I would still wear my gear.
Well, you can't do that.
I thought, Ryan, you were going to go, you'd be wearing your FedEx jersey.
I would probably, I would
right.
find
Well,
a FedEx
can't.
one just for fun.
You can't do that. Also, all kidding aside, in Europe, you can't do that. They won't let you in the stadium.
Yeah. Well, so side note and related, you cannot wear the opposing team colors in the FC Cincinnati supporter section.
Yeah, you should.
In Cincinnati.
And
there's a huge sign before you walk down there. Like if you're in the away team colors, do not come down here.
And if you do that at a Raiders game in Los Angeles, they will pee on you.
If there's a Raiders game in Los Angeles, it's another problem. Because yeah.
That's your initiation.
That's it. Yeah, that's expected. All right. Have a good night, gents.
Good job.
Thanks for listening and watching the Three Old Goalies. Be sure to join us next time. Like, subscribe so you don't miss out on any of our great content. You can follow us on Instagram or Twitter. Can't get enough of the Three Old Goalies? Be sure to check us out at www.3oldgoalies.com.